Well, welcome to you, dear listener, dear viewer. We're glad to see you. Well, we don't actually see you, but we pretend we see you. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the show today because you're just one of hundreds. Isn't that right, Pat?
Mm.
Hundreds and hundreds of
Absolutely.
people watch
Jude,
every
Jude,
one of these.
remember, you know what you were saying there? I used to remember listening to all these radio guys, and when they were signing off, see you tomorrow. Like, you never see them tomorrow.
Yeah, they never see them. Never see them.
Yeah,
And they say things like, "It's good having your company."
yeah,
Listen, we shouldn't be laughing at anything connected with her viewer. We're grateful for even two people watching us
yeah,
besides our nearest and dearest. Okay,
yeah.
okay, it's all right laughing now, but the world's on fire, so let's have a look at it. We're going to start with kind of a local story because it's similar in Scotland to our own dear native land, in that they have a party that is geared towards independence, the Scottish National Party. But the Scottish National Party recently expelled one of its members of the Scottish Parliament over what it called utterly abhorrent comments on the Israeli-Hamas conflict. The guy said, I've forgotten his name now, but he said the guy said
John
John
Mason,
Mason
John
is it?
Mason.
John
Yeah,
Mason.
yeah,
He said that if the Israelis had wanted to commit genocide, they would have gone after and killed 10 times as many Palestinians. And for that, he was booted out of the party. What do you think, Pat? Was that overly harsh or was that reasonable? Or
not at all, Jude. Absolutely, Jude. There seems to be some attitude in Britain and in certain circles in America that the Palestinians are subhuman. Uh, what there's 43,000 Palestinians dead. These
okay.
are figures even it's accepted by the UN and a lot of independent people as well. That there's up to about 100,000 wounded. The what is it? One of the medical journals in Britain thinks that the final death toll could be up as high as 160.
Hmm.
About 80,000 or 80% of Gaza is destroyed. The Israelis have killed 2,000 already in Lebanon.
Hmm.
There, I think, it's 600 dead in the West Bank. So anybody that sort of says Israel is not intent on, there, Jude, I was listening to, there's a guy on this morning in RT for a while,
Yeah.
and he was a former army guy,
Uh,
and he said that the Israelis have a doctrine that they will absolutely disproportionately kill all around them
yes,
to
I heard
send a
that.
message.
I heard
Yeah,
that. I heard that.
yeah,
Well, there's two things, Pat, I would say. First of all, talk about that second point. That guy was on and was saying that the Israeli official policy is to come back on any attack totally disproportionate. And the idea will be that the population, Palestinian population in general, will be so disgusted and so frightened that they'll insist that their war machine, Hamas or Hezbollah or whoever, stop attacking Israel. Now, that is exactly the policy which was adopted by loyalist paramilitaries here. It is literally terrorism. What you do is you frighten the bejesus out of the population generally by killing plenty of them. And as a result, they put pressure on the militant people who are fighting the conflict or the war. So I think if I'm not sure if he's totally right, but that would be a policy, and it would make it would make Israel literally a terrorist state. But let's talk briefly about the other thing. This guy got thrown out because he said if they wanted to commit genocide, they'd need to have been killing 10 times as many people, Palestinians, as they did. I think he's right. I mean, as I see genocide, um, genocide is trying to wipe out a people. You know, you want to
yeah,
just wipe them off the face of the earth. Or actually, in the case of Israel, I think you'd have to extend the definition of genocide. That is, wipe them out as far as your area is concerned. In other words, push them right out of where
yeah.
they are. Uh, I'm not sure. Is that really genocide? I always thought of genocide as saying we're going to clean wipe everybody out. If that's the case, then
Yeah.
awful though it is what they've done, it's still only 100, 200,000 out of how many million?
Well, remember there was the Turkish genocide in Armenia. like the Armenian survey. I don't know if it's can you absolutely wipe out an entire population? But I think it's what it means, or my limited understanding of it, it means when you go out and you kill a substantial number for no particular reason who are non-combatants. In other words, you're just killing all around you. That's a form of genocide. No, no, that's not.
Ooh.
That's my definition of it. I take it
I
what
think
they're
that's
saying. You're
stretching
not.
it a bit, Pat. I think stretching it a wee
I
bit.
think it might be as well. But I think what they're really saying is the Israelis are just killing all around them.
Oh
They're
yeah,
killing
no doubt about
women,
that.
children, bombing right, left, and center. Now, I don't think you have to complete a genocide for it to be described as genocide or attempted
No.
genocide, even.
But I don't think they're intent on wiping the Palestinians out. They just want to clear them off. In fact, I heard that with a podcast about a guy he was talking about when he was in living in Israel. That the one thing that struck him was that the Israelis were intent on pushing the Palestinians. If they were living within the state of Israel, push them out of it. If they're outside it, push them back further. If they're in the Gaza Strip, push them into Lebanon. At every stage, push them out as far as you possibly can. So you could see that, I suppose, as a form of genocide. And I'd see that as being what's happening to
Yeah.
terrify the
Uh,
Palestinian people because of the disproportionate response and also push them so they're not a factor in the Middle
no,
East.
but to get back to your man, John Mason, I think it was the flippant way he said it, as if, well, hey, look, 42,000 doesn't really count. I think Ian Blackfoot, who was the former leader in the House of Commons, said that I think he said, Tim, you're a disgrace. You're not fit to be a public representative. So
Well,
they saw, the fact that there was
yeah.
42,000 dead and
Hmm.
that God knows how many injured, and the real uh, what do you call it? The real figure could be so much higher. I think it was the attitude, the pro-Israeli attitude that the Israelis are all right.
Well, if that's the case, I mean, if that's the case, I definitely would agree. But I have some experience of people saying something that actually is true but inconvenient.
Yeah,
He's saying that he doesn't believe that Israel is bent on genocide in terms of the definition of the word. Otherwise, they'd be
yeah.
killing an awful lot more. I mean, they're doing pretty well now, and it is disgusting. But I need to hear what the tone was of this
Very good,
John
because
Mason, and
I
I
think I think
worry.
you're probably uh, there's a massive amount of killing going on, and it's
Hmm.
massively disproportionate. But whether it fits the definition of genocide, I take your point, because genocide is the wiping out of an entire race.
Yeah, and certainly what your point you raised first, Pat. I think that notion of them putting the fear of God into the Palestinians in order for them to put pressure on groups like Hamas and Hezbollah to stop, I think that is very, very likely, which definitely makes Israel a terrorist state. By definition,
Yeah.
that's what a terrorist is. Somebody who tries to strike fear into the population generally and demoralize them to the extent that they won't fight or their forces won't
Anyway,
fight.
I was just to digress for a wee second. About 15, 20 minutes ago, I was reading Ben Lowry's take on Israel, and he says he can't understand why Western liberals are on the side of these primitive people who would do X, Y, and Z. He said, just look at the videos of October 7th. Fair enough.
Uh,
I,
yeah.
I would give Ben videos from from October 8th until now, and I think that my videos would outweigh his by some considerable distance.
You'd think, Pat. I mean, I realize that Ben is a journalist or an editor for a unionist paper, but do you think he really believes that? That this is,
Absolutely, he believes it.
not that these were awful things, but does he really believe that that's the whole story?
Absolutely, he believes it. I have no doubt whatsoever.
So you
None.
think well, he must be very, very stupid then, because surely he sees what's on TV we see it on TV every night.
No, no. Jude, if you have got the mentality of the colonizer, you don't understand the colonized. And the old unionists they identify with Israel.
Oh,
Israel
yeah.
is their buddy.
That's
And the
fair
same as
enough.
the whites
Fair
in
enough
South
to do
Africa.
that. But my point would be for him to turn his back on the tens of thousands of Palestinians killed and to focus
Yeah.
solely on the 2,000 Israelis that were killed.
Yeah,
It's sort of
yeah, but you know that the old unionist one, Jude, that we're right and we're sort of God's chosen people and we're the lost tribe of Israel and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, Jude, hey, by the way, you mentioned the Irish journal. I think he's called Cairns. I think Paul Cairns,
Yeah.
who lives in Jerusalem. I think he said
Yes.
the war he's saying is not the war. What's
Uh,
your take on that?
Oh, and I'd be amazed if it was the same war. The war we're seeing is, and I'm amazed we're allowed to see it, is the terrible, terrible destruction of buildings in Gaza and people being buried under it and people pulling out these bodies or people half dead, covered in dust and blood. I mean, it's awful. You may be sure that that's not being shown in Israel every evening. What they're showing is again replays of October the 7th or whatever. But I mean, it's a cliche, but truth is the first casualty of war. You wouldn't
Yeah.
expect, would you? Would you expect for Israel to show what their troops are doing?
Yeah. But I started thinking about the last day. Israel has banned uh, all international media from Gaza.
Hmm.
It has attacked Al Jazeera personnel at some considerable rate. Usually, by the way, attacking their families. There was one Al Jazeera journalist, I think two of his sons were killed and a couple of his grandchildren were killed, which is a heavy attritional rate. And look what's happening about with the UN in Lebanon. Dude, the UN as a monitoring force, they're not there to stand as well as a peacekeeping force. The Israelis have really gone after UN, UNIFIL. They've attacked their positions. They're injured several. Dude, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, is not allowed into Israel.
Hmm.
Just think about that for a minute.
Hmm.
He's banned from Israel. They've attacked UNRWA in Gaza. Anything to do with the international community, the Israelis want to totally, completely run the narrative
Hmm.
that from an Israeli position, and they have lost the propaganda war big time
I think
because of
so.
arrogance and their
I heard Jeremy.
brutality and their disproportionate. Sorry.
I heard Jeremy Bowen, the British reporter, on
Yeah.
today, I think it was,
Yeah.
and he was saying that this attack on UNIFIL, United Nations Force, is nothing new. He says that goes back decades, and he remembers being at a UNIFIL or a United Nations center where they were doing exactly the same job, observing, and Israel attacked the UNIFIL center. So
Yeah.
it appears to be their kind of policy. The thing is, you see, UNIFIL is reporting, recording
Yeah.
what's going on. And I
Yeah.
mean, that's one thing that
And
the
it's
Israelis
significant. The
don't
first
want.
thing that the Israelis did was shoot out the UNIFIL cameras.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, from a certain point of view, you can see their logic of it. I mean, Thatcher was the same way with the Falklands
Mm.
War or the
Yeah.
Malvinas. She didn't allow any cameras out there, or at
Yeah.
least only when their cameras were reporting the proper thing. And you see, people learn from history. America lost in Vietnam in great
Because of
measure,
the
I
body
believe,
bags
because
coming back.
people were
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
blown up on their screens.
Uh, but by the way, just one other final point before we move on. Last night there was a change. The Hezbollah launched a drone attack on Haifa, and one of them got through and it killed four soldiers. For last night, there apparently the head of the IDF was in that base where the attack took place, and for a long time it was thought that he had actually perished in the thing. Now there were celebrations of some considerable note on social media when it was first mooted that he might be. That subsequently turns out that he wasn't. But I'm wondering now, Hezbollah, after the Nasrallah was killed and then the second command was killed, and
Yes.
remember the pagers and all that sort of stuff,
Mhm.
that took out the sort of the middle management. But I think Hezbollah has now sort of regrouped. And I wonder, as there's really taken on a lot more than they thought.
Well, it would be very interesting because this is something Israel has been doing. As you say, they took out they killed the head of Hezbollah. They killed the second rank of leaders, I think, as well.
Yeah,
And you have to stand back and marvel at the amount of information they must have on Hezbollah that they can hit them in
yeah,
this way precisely. Go for the people who are running it. But if the tables are reversed, if Hezbollah now can strike at a place where the IDF commander is. That'd be
yeah,
very worrying for Israel. I mean, it's
yeah,
bad propaganda, And secondly, it's pretty damn worrying if they would have to, supposing they had to report Hezbollah has just sent in a drone and has killed, the second in command in the IDF, say the second command, that would be a huge moral or propaganda victory, let's say, for
Yeah,
Hezbollah.
yeah, absolutely. Anyway, will we move on to closer to home and what's happening in Sinn Féin?
Oh God, yes. I find that painful. Somebody said, when sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions. It just seems to be one, dare I say it, one fucking thing after another. You had Michael McGonigal and him being convicted, even though he was ejected at that stage from the party. Michael McMonigal daring to be in a room breathing the same air as Michelle O'Neill. You had the two PR people who were investigated and then resigned and quit the party. And now you have Brian Stanley, a senior member of the Sinn Féin in the South, and Joe, sheriff, I forgot what committee, but he has been. You see, Mary Lou was on today, and I thought it was very interesting. She said, we've passed the whole thing to the Gardaí. That suggests it's not just that he's done something that's like this guy with the Scottish Nationalist Party who said something that was sort of bad news. They didn't want one of their own members saying this. Sounds, I mean, like the law has been broken, not some code of conduct within the party.
Yeah, nobody's saying what this, so I don't know, and obviously neither do you. So I really don't. But it should, as you say, when these things come, they come together. I know a lot of this, by the way, seriously, is self-inflicted. Nobody can accuse the outside media of what's going on here, right? First of all, as you say, there was Michael McMonigal. Then there was a Patricia Ryan down in Kildare, TD.
Yeah.
She resigned. Uh, then over the weekend, I think there was some sort of senior official. He resigned after it was claimed that he sent inappropriate text messages or social media messages to some 17-year-old girl. Brian Stanley, then there was a bombshell on Saturday night. Brian Stanley, who was the chairperson of the finance committee, and remember, he was very high profile during the probe into RTE, and he's a very capable guy.
Hmm.
And I don't know what's happened or what's gone on, but he said it was a kangaroo court. Lynn Boylan was on yesterday, the former MEP, and she says that is actually very unfair. She says, why doesn't Brian go public and tell what it was all about? Now, I don't even know what that's about, Jen. I really genuinely
Hmm.
don't have,
Hmm.
I haven't even heard a rumor. So, and
Yeah.
this morning, Mary Lou, apparently, I didn't hear it either. She was on RT this morning, and she said there was due process. The whole thing wasn't finalized, but the fact that Brian Stanley pulled the plug and went public, they have now referred it over to the Gardaí. Of course, Jude, the very question now is going to come out. If it was so serious, why didn't you hand it over to the Gardaí in the first place?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I suppose you might be hoping against hope that it wasn't true. Uh, yeah. I'm not. I have mixed feelings on it. Uh, all the things that you list indeed are adding to this. What's the word? Clusterfuck that Sinn Féin are going through. Um, would it be? It's very very convenient for Fine Gael. It's very fortunate, let's say, for Fine Gael and for Fianna Fáil that Sinn Féin just before the election suddenly bang 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 bang. There's all these series of scandals or charges or betrayals or arrests. Um, you don't think that might be possible? Somebody sending a Trojan horse in there?
No, Jude, no. These are nearly all internal matters. And like, and somebody else remember too. I think it was Irish Independent or someone. Apparently, one councillor resigned, claiming that I don't know what it was in relation to, but all questions related to being submitted to Mary Lou had to be vetted.
Pat,
Jude,
you know yourself. Plenty of people would say, if you're going to interview me, look, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to talk about that, okay?
yeah.
And you'd have to then decide whether you're going to interview them. But I would have thought that was common practice among many.
No, no, it was no. This was not a media interview. It was from a councillor,
Oh,
for within the party. In other words, they're saying, well, wait a minute, can we not ask the leader certain questions?
yeah,
So
yeah.
anyway, Jude, right, hey, the Mickey Monagle thing, self-inflicted, it's nothing to do with anybody outside.
Yeah.
Brian Stanley resigning has nothing to do with anything outside. Your one Ryan, the Kildare MP or TD resigning, nothing to do with anybody else.
Well,
So, Jude, you see, I always held the view, and I remember it from Martin McGuinness. It was Sinn Féin against the world. That was the way they saw everybody. They
mm,
thought everybody was against it, and the party ruled with iron discipline.
mm.
And I think they've lost that. The world's changed, and they don't seem to have realised. Well, the south of Ireland is not a war situation as it was in the north.
Well, Pat, I know you're saying all right, and I agree partially with the sentiment, but uh, Sinn Féin have been hit with at least three or four major things, which are making them look very bad in the eyes of the public.
Absolutely.
And no other party has experienced anything like this. So
No.
are we saying that Sinn Féin is a party that has all these sort of criminals or people who are untrustworthy or whatever, distinct from other parties, which don't have that kind of thing?
Not at all. See, like in the past, Fianna Fáil guys have given references to for rapists. They've given references to guys who were in dodgy deals. The party, the Galway tent. If you follow up some of the things went on there, backhanders and envelopes and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
large sums of money for planning permissions and all the rest of it. Not at all. There's no doubt, but it just seems very unfortunate for Sinn Féin. There's definitely an election in the air, and they don't have their sorrows to seek. And I am saying, Jude, contrary to what I know a lot of Sinn Féin people might be thinking different, but I think most of this is self-inflicted.
Well, it could well be. At the same time, I'm very struck by the contrast between the state of other parties. There isn't a whiff of that kind of scandal, and Sinn Féin, which just seems to be having them in large bundles. But then I always was very cynical and always suspected the worst. And you, on the other hand, Pat,
But
are
Jude,
a
maybe
sweet and
maybe
trusting
Sinn Féin,
soul. You're a trusting soul.
no, Jude, maybe Sinn Féin are coming through that process that maybe their party guidelines and structures maybe need reviewed. And their procedures maybe need strengthening.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
Surely it would have been simple to say, in the party rule book for the officers, if anybody is suspended by the party, do not give them a reference for another job.
well, that seems pretty odd. On the
Yeah,
other hand, I'm sure that a lot of this goes on. If you think about big institutions, if
yeah,
you're working side by side with a colleague for years, decades maybe, and
yeah.
that person gets the boot, and then they come to you for a reference, would there not be at least a temptation to give them a decent reference and keep quiet about it rather than go
Dude,
to the
that's
headboard?
what exactly, and that's exactly what happened in Sinn Féin, and that's
Hmm.
what they're getting hauled over the coals for.
Aye, aye,
Obviously, two friends knew Mickey McMonigle. They'd worked with him
hmm,
and said, "Ah, geez, Mickey's not found guilty of
aye,
anything yet,
yeah,
and he needs to
aye,
make a living. So here's,
aye, yeah.
that's what friends do."
Uh, well, I suppose there's a lesson there. Politics is a pretty grim sort of game.
Yeah,
Is there anything else we have to say? Oh yeah, there was a thing about very briefly about an Irish person in the Irish Times today, an Irish person living in Israel, and he says that the war we see on TV is not the one other people see. The
uh,
one that is to say, the reporting in Israel is rather
uh,
different from the reporting in
but we,
Ireland.
we have mentioned that earlier, Jude. Basically, this is the guy. I said, was it John or Paul Cairns? But he said what was interesting about him, Jude, was he said he has two Israeli kids, and he doesn't know when to tell them about the International Criminal Court's finding that Israel is on the basis there's plausible case for genocide about some of the things going on. But he also said that Netanyahu is unbelievably unpopular in Israel. And but he says the other thing, Netanyahu has basic. The reason he's still there is if we don't fight, we die. And he says
Hmm.
that's the mentality of the Israelis. They think they're getting attacked by Hezbollah, by the Houthis, by Hamas, and so on, and they see themselves as under attack. Now, the rest of the world sees them as the aggressor, but that's neither here nor there.
Hmm. Well, here's a final little teaser for you, Pat, and I haven't listed it, but I was listening to a podcast just yesterday, actually, by a guy called Ezra Klein, who's from New York.
Uh,
He's Jewish, as his name might indicate, and he writes for the New York Times. And he was interviewing a guy, a black guy, an American,
yeah.
who had gone to Israel, not to Israel, no, to the Middle East. And he had talked to people in Hamas. He talked to ordinary Palestinians. He'd been to the West Bank and he'd explored around. And Ezra Klein said to him, "Did you speak to any of the Israelis?" And he said,
Mm.
"No." And he says, "Well, why not? Why didn't you speak to them?" And he said, "Well, as far as I'm concerned, this is a clear-cut thing. We know who the people in the wrong are, and they're doing bad things. I'm concerned to look at the people who are not in the wrong and try to see what their case is." What do you think of that? It came as a surprise to me because we're so used to this idea of balance. But there are
Yeah.
certain things, you don't have a balance, for example, between if a guy kills his wife, right? You
Mm.
don't have a balance between an interview with, say, the dead woman's cousin and
Yeah.
with the murderer. You
Yeah.
say there are certain people you talk to and others you don't. What do you think of that one, Pat? Do you think he should have spoken to? He's got a book coming out. It's going to be a bestseller, apparently, about his
Aye.
visit.
Well, dude, know somebody to use an even more extreme. You don't interview the rapist and then the victim and treat them both equally.
Uh,
And what Israel, Jude, I am unequivocal. I do not support what Hezbollah done October 7th. But what I am saying is what Israel has done and has been doing is totally, utterly unacceptable. Jude, between what was it, January 1st and October 6th, there was 200, I think, 23 Palestinians shot dead by the IDF. And the 15 years before October 7th, there were more than 6,000 Palestinians killed. I can't remember. I think it's 10,000 young Gazans being held in administrative detention.
hmm.
The Israelis have been colonizing in a very barbaric way uh, Gaza, and the Gazans have every right to fight back. And to describe as terrorism resistance is totally and utterly dishonest.
Well, in that case, October the 7th was, as somebody described it as being a jailbreak, where
Yeah,
these people have said, we've been this way for decades. We keep
yeah.
having the IDF come in and murder people. They have these settlers who are building on land which is forbidden to be built on, according to
Yeah.
the
And getting away
agreement.
with it.
So
Yeah,
we want to do something, and it looks like now Israel is trying to cozy up to Saudi Arabia and so on. So we'll
yeah,
be further isolated. Well, we're going to do
yeah,
something that'll enrage them and it'll change the whole thing. And the guy in that podcast said, and that's exactly what happened. Joe
yeah.
Biden
And
warned
that's a
them.
great expression, a jailbreak, because
Yeah.
these people are hemmed in. Dude, Gaza is the biggest open air prison in the world. This claim that we allowed it to run. The Israelis raided it regularly in the middle of the night.
Mm.
They controlled entry and exit. The Gazans aren't allowed to fish more than about 3 miles out. So entry from air, sea, and land is controlled by Israel, and
Mm.
yet they say, "Oh no, they're at self-determination, and it's their rule themselves." Like that's like the prison governor says, "Right, see in the cells you can do whatever you want, but like we rule the rest of it." It's a
Uh,
ridiculous thing to claim that was self-governing.
well, I think I most feel now is when you see every so often you'll see some Palestinian family looking pretty distraught, and the interviewer talks to them, and they say, "This is the fifth time we have had to
Uh,
move. The Israelis have warned us here there'll be harm here, so move south." We move south, and then shortly after that, they say, "You're likely to be harm here, move up north." So they're
uh,
shunted around. And in their
uh,
hearts, they know that they're just as likely to be killed in the new place
yeah.
as they were in the old.
Sponsored, and
It's
it's
sort of like
done deliberately. Yeah, yeah.
it's almost like a cat playing with a mouse, you know?
Aye,
They're
and
going to
dude,
kill.
this thing the Israelis are doing. We're the most moral army in the world. That's first consumption for the idiots in America who buy that crap. It's absolute. They are not a moral army. They're doctors who say they have treated the bodies or dealt with the bodies of children who were shot in the head by snipers. Is that a moral army?
Oh, it's pretty awful, Pat. Bad stuff this for a Monday morning. Anything you can
Yeah.
cheer us up with, Pat? Any?
No, by the way, just a final. You were asked. Remember, we were supposed to do a book of the week. You know what I
Ah,
started doing, Doctor Collins?
ah.
Started reading Lorna Doone.
Who wrote Lorna Doone?
R.D. Blackmore.
Like Marshall, I never heard, I've heard of Lorna. I mean, that used to be on the course when I was a kid.
Yeah.
That's in columns, but I don't remember the name that he or she
Uh,
has written many other
I
novels.
think I read The Count of Monte Cristo not that long ago. I think I'm on a. I might read all the old classics because I never read them the first time around because I couldn't be arsed, but I'll might get around to doing it now before I depart this
Well,
world.
I'm reading two books at the moment. One of them is I can't even remember the name of it, but it's a huge fat Stephen what's his
King,
name? Hi,
King.
Stephen King's novel, and it's about uh, Kennedy's assassination, and it's
Uh,
a sort of space time thing. He goes back in
yeah,
time to see if he can kill somebody to stop this terrible killing that happened with. I mean, it
well, now
sounds
note
corny, but he does it so well. You know, he's a very good writer,
absolutely.
very
He's
plain, very plain. And he says in the course of it, he'll give um, the narrator is a former English teacher, and he remembers and mentions, the advice he gives to kids that are writing or want to be writers, that you say,
yeah,
this happens, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this
yeah,
happened. So you see this
yeah,
presenting to your reader the sequence of events and how one thing affects another thing. Which
yeah,
again is what the whole thing about Kennedy, that if you could
yeah,
change one thing, that would change things to come. I
yeah,
enjoy King. He's very easy, but he's so, geez, the book is so fat. I'll probably be about 102 before he gets finished.
yeah. What do you call him? The guy, Ken, what Fawcett or something? He writes pot boilers, but they're very good in their own way. Anyway, Doctor Collins, that's it for today.
Enjoy your week, Pat. Look after
And
yourself.
you
Yeah,
see you on Friday.
remember, you've only one body. Treat it carefully during
Yes,
the week.
my body is a temple.
Okay. All the best, Pat. Thanks.